At the time of writing this script, I graduated high school 2 weeks ago on June 9th, 2023. In 4 years, I will graduate college. Sometime within the next 70 years, I will probably be dead. Sorry to drop something so morbid on you, but I've been pretty reflective as of late. The past 18 years of my life have been a journey. I've made and lost friends, I've taken risks, I've succeeded and failed in my life, and I've watched the 76ers fail to make it past the second round year after year after year. Time is absolutely unstoppable. It's a force beyond any of our control. Despite humanity and mind's best efforts, we've been unable to slow it down. In fact, at least for me, it seemed to have sped up. I know this is just blatantly not true though. A minute now is the same length as it was yesterday. A week today is the same period it was when I first entered high school. And a year now is the same stretch it was when I was born. But it just doesn't feel like it. Up to my freshman year in high school, time felt relatively normal. Like I was traveling at one-time speed. But as each year went by, it was like someone was hitting the fast forward button on the remote or increasing the playback speed on a YouTube video. This realization forced me to put my life into perspective. I began to realize that this feeling would only get worse the older I got. I was running out of time to be a kid. I would have to move into a world that I honestly was not ready for, and that scared me. It became the only existential crisis that I've had in my life, and I had to learn to come to terms with it. Now, I'm not the only person that's experienced this type of thing. This phenomenon has been discussed for hundreds of years, studied by philosophers like Paul Janet in the 1800s. Janet proposed the proportional theory, or the idea that each year that we age takes up less of a fraction of our entire lives. Let me visualize this for you. This bar will represent your entire life. The first year of your life will take up the entire bar. When the second year of your life passes, it only takes up half the bar. Then the third year passes and it only takes up a third. You can obviously notice the trend here. Each year gets smaller and smaller comparatively to the rest of your life, until a year feels like a singular drop in the ocean of time. This perfectly summed up my feelings on the topic and put into words what I couldn't. As you can probably tell by now, the realization that I had a limited amount of time in my life captured my attention, and it led me to try games other than the fast-paced shooters I had played throughout my life. I'm looking at you, Fortnite. I decided to try out random indie games that piqued my interests, mostly slower, story-oriented games based around the conversations and interactions you have with the characters. Games like Adios, Mutazione, and the main subject of interest today, Before Your Eyes. Now, the idea of time being used as an integral part of a game isn't new. The connection between time and video games is a tale as old as, well, time. Majora's Mask, Life is Strange, and a million other games over the years have used time as a device to move their plots forward. But Before Your Eyes handles this differently. In the game, you play as Benny Bryn, a recently deceased soul floating in limbo, until he is picked up by the Ferryman. The Ferryman exists as a guide meant to deliver specially chosen souls to a being called the Gatekeeper. This Gatekeeper judges the souls delivered to her and determines if they are worthy of moving into her so-called city beyond. Because you are in this point in between, you no longer have your body, only your eyes, so the Ferryman has to present your case for you. Now, he can't tell the Gatekeeper about your life if he doesn't know about it, so you have to guide him through it. This game is a recount of Benny's life, flashing through moment to moment. Like the name suggests, the game is controlled by your eyes. It makes use of your webcam to determine when your eyes are opened or closed. When they're open, you watch these events play out. A day at the beach, a new friend, piano lessons, or a funny moment in class. But just like life, you can't stay there forever, and when you eventually close your eyes, either voluntarily or not, you're dragged away to the next point in the story. Life is filled with these tiny moments that build the foundations of who we are. These moments build our character, and in the game, you get to experience the moments that made Benny who he is. You become engrossed in Benny's life. You want to see everything you possibly can. In the story, Benny fights to experience everything again for as long as possible. But a lot of the time, you'll accidentally blink and leave before you're able to fully appreciate and experience that moment in Benny's life. The action of blinking is an involuntary effort, or an action that you don't need to consciously think about to do. And when you think of not doing that action, it gets harder not to do it. For example, when I mentioned that you have to breathe to live, it moves to the forefront of your mind, and now you have to do it voluntarily. And it becomes harder to do it involuntarily. Get it? Often, you'll be taken away before you realize that you are about to blink, and I think that's a beautiful way to convey life in general. As you grow old, these small moments will often pass by before we realize it, and like blinking, we can fight it, but we will always lose. These moments will disappear in a blink of an eye, now just being part of the distant past. As the story heads further into Benny's life, it seems to reflect everything I've mentioned about the proportional theory. The amount of moments we experience in Benny's adulthood is significantly less than the amount of scenes when Benny is a child. From the point where Benny is diagnosed with a sickness that would last over a year to the final moments we see in his life, the gap between scenes jumps from days and weeks to months and years. I can go on about how this is some reflection of life or how I fear this could very well be something I experience in my future, but I can't, because it's all a lie. Okay, not all of it, just the adult sections of Benny's life. When you get pulled back to the ferryman decides to brush up on some of the details of your story and provides a test run. You choose what you want him to say, things like if Benny was lonely or happy, if he saw his mother as encouraging or demanding. Things seemed normal until this happens.
Alright! I get it! I hear what you're saying.
The liar birds. They proclaim that Benny's story was a lie. The ferryman then explains that these birds are the souls that were not truthful to the gatekeeper, forever cursed to fly around limbo as seagulls. Now, the ferryman wants the real story. You take one final trip through Benny's life, flipping through the pages until you reach the truth. In the original journey through his life, you get glimpses of these memories, but they would always melt away before reaching their conclusion. These moments were the darkest parts of his childhood, the death of his grandfather, kittens being eaten by coyotes, and his mother's doubt whether or not he would be able to get through his year-long sickness. Despite the pain these memories obviously brought to Benny, the ferryman urges him to push through as lying to himself and the gatekeeper won't help anyone. Over this year-long sequence, Benny is given a typewriter to write out his thoughts, make his own story that he would have liked to act out if he wasn't bedridden. Eventually, after an undisclosed amount of time, he begins to grow bitter and angry, feeling helpless against the disease inside him. This pain from his personal life and the pain from his disease manifests itself as this angry, pulsating red blob. As time goes on, it becomes clear that things aren't getting better. Despite this, he continues to fight. He tries to live the best way he can, building enough energy to play the piano for his mother despite his waning condition. Eventually, the disease grows stronger. That red blob begins to encapsulate the entire screen more and more each day until everything melts away and the only thing left is nothingness. This sequence is heartbreaking. Watching this character, this person, fight and fight despite everything stacked against them, only to lose in the end. I think everyone has experienced some type of loss in their life, whether to a disease like Benny had or some other circumstance. Everyone has experienced this type of loss. Losing a loved one hurts, but loss is what makes life meaningful. There wouldn't be a point of living if we had an infinite amount of time on this planet. Loss forces us to appreciate the ones we have now, knowing that it could be taken away in just one blink of an eye. I think that instead of worrying about what is to come, instead of worrying about what little time it may seem we have left, it's more important to cherish what we have done already. The game's final sequence emphasizes this, with the ferryman and Benny's mom driving home the point that despite his life only lasting 12 years, he filled the ones he knew with love, hope, and joy. He lived a good life, a full life, one that ultimately had meaning because of the impact he had on the ones that knew him. For a period of my life, I was worried about the world I was going to step into. I was worried about how fast my future would unfold before me. But it's dawned on me that despite the fact that life will feel like it's getting shorter, it's still more than what some get to experience. I realize now that life is what I make it, and despite that fear I felt, there is something better on the other side. At the end of the game, Benny ends up being accepted into the city. He gets to move on to something happy and joyful. Benny lived his life to the best of his ability, despite the inherent shortness of it. 2 weeks ago, I graduated high school. In 4 years, I will graduate college. Sometime within the next 70 years, I will probably be dead. But now, instead of worrying about how fast that final date is coming, I'm going to appreciate everything I've done already, and maybe you will too.